Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Simon Timpley from the International Food Safety and Quality Network. Welcome to edition 36 of the Food Safety Fridays webinar program. Well, you will notice it's not Friday today, it's actually Wednesday, but we're having it early this week because our friends in the USA are having a nice long holiday this year for this weekend for Thanksgiving. So we've decided to have it a bit early this week. I'm delighted to say this week's presenter is Jennifer McCreary, Technical Manager Training and Education at NSF International. And today, Jennifer is going to be talking about allergen management, best practice in allergen management. I'll just read you the synopsis from the webinar. Allergens are a significant hazard in the food and beverage industry. Allergen management has evolved over the years, along with the growth in the knowledge and understanding of the issue. However, effective allergen management continues to be a significant challenge to the food and beverage industry. This webinar will discuss the industry best practices in allergen management and will assist you in development of a robust and effective allergen management system. That sounds great, doesn't it? So we'll head over to Jennifer in a minute. I'd just like to say thanks to the sponsors who help to bring these free of charge to you every week. We've had 36 this year, all free of charge, free education and a free certificate of attendance to put in your portfolio, which is fantastic. And that's thanks to our sponsors, Trace Analytics, Safe Food 360, IFS and FSSC 22000, who've got a nice new logo there, as you can see, just recently launched. Okay. I'll say hello to you, Jennifer. Welcome.
Good morning, Simon. How are you?
I'm fantastic. It's really great to have you along. You're looking and sounding perfect, so we're hoping for a good webinar today. Okay. I'll just talk to the audience about next week's webinar, and if you can get your slides ready, Jennifer, I'll come over to you shortly.
Okay.
Okie dokie. Right, ladies and gents. Next Friday, we've got Ruth Bell back. Ruth's done a few presentations this year. In fact, she did the very first one, Food Safety Fridays #1, back in January of this year. And she's done another couple since. Very good speaker, very knowledgeable. Next Friday, it's about validation of food safety control measures. And the webinar discusses the importance of validating food safety control measures to ensure food safety management system capability. Validation of food safety control measures is essential to ensure that a food safety management system will be capable of producing safe food and remains effective over a period of time. Validation involves examining theoretically the scientific justifications for the control measures identified and practically challenge them to determine they will be suitable and capable of consistently achieving the required level of control to ensure safe food. Quite a lot of waffle there by me. If you go on the website, you can read that again and take that in. A lot of people get confused between validation and verification. There's always lots of questions on the discussion forum about that. So if you log on next Friday, you'll find a lot more about validation. So hopefully you can join us. You can register actually from the sidebar there by just clicking the link. That'll open in a new window and you can do that there, or follow up with I'll follow up with an email and then you can subscribe from there. The webinar is being recorded today. We'll send an email within 24 hours with the slides, the recording, the certificate, everything you need, all bundled up. So don't worry if you miss anything today. We will send an email within a couple of days, within a day. And that's it. I'll be back for the Q&A later, and I'll hand you into the capable hands of Jennifer. Okay, see you in a bit.
Thanks, Simon. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, I guess, as appropriate to wherever you are. I want to thank Simon and IFSQN for this opportunity to speak with you today about some best practices in allergen management. I work with NSF GFTC, and I guess perhaps we might be better known as NSF Canada. We're part of the family of the NSF International group we're a group who have trainers, food safety quality management consultants, packaging specialists, and some of you may know us through our third-party auditors who come in through the NSF International certification body. NSF GFTC is located about an hour outside of Toronto on the grounds of the University of Guelph. And we've been in operation for just a little over 20 years, which thinking about it is about the same amount of time that I've been involved in allergen management, both with working with clients of NSF GFTC as well as in private industry when I was the QA manager, the corporate QA manager who was responsible for implementing and maintaining allergen management best practices for our 22 bakeries. What I plan to go through today is to start off with first looking at how we would conduct an allergen risk assessment, and that's really to look and to see where we have potential for allergens, perhaps undeclared allergens, to get into our product, as well as where we have intentional allergens through our raw materials and ingredients. And then once we know where our risk is of having that material coming in, then look and see what we need to do to develop an allergen management policy and the parts that would go into that policy and implementing our allergen plan. So going to start off with our allergen risk assessment. And I guess the first thing is just to make sure that we all are really understanding when we're thinking in terms of allergen risk assessment is we want to prevent an allergic reaction to the consumers of our products. And this definition is as it says, it's an adverse immune response to harmless substances that most of us could be exposed to without any issue. However, there are certain parts of the population that if they're exposed to the same material, develop an allergic reaction. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail in terms of allergic reactions and how they come about. If you are interested, Ruth Bell did an excellent presentation back in June. She had the allergen management supporting your business that she delivered for IFSQN, and it was an excellent introduction to what the allergens were and how they interact. And so if you are interested, yeah, I would recommend that you have a look at that previous webinar. That we're going to start out in terms of our allergen program. And I guess even before setting up that allergen management program, there's two things that I'd like you to remember is that what it is it's the protein component of the food that's the problem. It's that the body takes in that protein and has an adverse reaction to it, an allergic reaction to it. And that what it is that it is when that protein component, that allergen, is in the product, in that final food, and it's not identified, it's not included in the ingredient list that is on the package, so that somebody who has a food allergy, that is the only way that they are able to avoid that food allergy is by reading that ingredient list and then not consuming that product. And I want to just, as I say, I learned early on in my training to make sure that people had an understanding that it's the unidentified or the unlabeled allergen that's the biggest threat. I was delivering a training program, and I had a baker in the program who was having a terrible time trying to figure out how he was going to implement an allergen program for wheat. And when I realized what his issue is we determined that he had wheat on all of his packages, and so that in his case, wheat was not an allergen that he needed to have a large control program for in place. When we think in terms of allergen management, we really have one of two goals. One is, as we said, if you're making a product that has an allergen in it, it's key that you make sure that that allergen, that food ingredient, is included on the label. And number two, if you're making a product that doesn't have is not supposed to have a specific allergen in it, is that you have put all of the practices in place to make sure that we do not have a potential of cross contact. So let's get started. And is that, as we said, the purpose of our allergen risk assessment is to determine the risk of unintentional presence of allergens in the finished product, so that they'd be in there and somebody who has that food allergy doesn't know that it's in there. So a couple of things that we need to do is, first off, is really to identify whether the ingredient itself, the raw materials that we're bringing in, the ingredients that we're bringing in, or our product intentionally contains an allergenic foodstuff. So is it coming in the raw materials or the ingredients? Is it something that we are using at our own facility? And this is an example of a checklist. I'm sure that a number of you have seen something like this or something similar. This happens to be one that's available from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, CFIA, that they had developed. And I like this format of this one. When doing, this would be something that would be sent out to your supplier, and you would ask them to fill one of these out for every raw material or ingredient that they would be sending to you. That shouldn't be one just per supplier, but one per product name or raw material that comes in. And so what it is that they would look at what they were sending you, and then they would indicate whether it was present in the product that they were sending you. Hopefully you already know that, or if it was present in products that were also manufactured on the same line as your product or material, or if they had it present in the plant. What this does is this allows you to know, is there potential for cross contact at your supplier's facility? And so what they do is they fill this in and they put a yes or no in every box on that table. They're not to leave any empty cells. The other thing that I'll draw your attention to here is that they have given examples of what the raw material may be. So instead of just calling it peanut, they can call it ground nuts or peanut flour. For example, with milk, it might be sodium caseinate that would be there. They have given what may be some derivatives. This is useful for your supplier because there may not be individuals who realize that casein is milk protein. So if we just put down milk, they may not realize that, and we may get an incomplete table that's sent back. Another thing that I've learned with using this checklist is oftentimes, excuse me, oftentimes it may be the QA manager who sends this out, but I found that we have better success in getting the information back if we make this the responsibility of the purchasing department, that when they're purchasing products, that they would send this out to be able to have it back. And so I find sometimes that they get a little better response than we may get as the QA manager, because our supplier wants to sell it to that purchasing manager. The other key part of this is that when this checklist is completed and it's sent back in from your supplier, make sure that there is someone at your facility, someone who's qualified and has an understanding, that goes through and they look at the information that's been sent back to you. They're looking and seeing what the response has been from that supplier. I have gone out on a few allergen audits, and as I'm looking through, I've had the company who I was auditing say to me that they use no peanut products in their facility. And as I'm looking through the allergen checklist, I find that a couple of their suppliers used peanut packaged peanut products on the same line. And when I asked them what controls they had asked their supplier to maintain, the response was, there's somebody who uses peanuts. No one had looked at this checklist when it had come back, and so they didn't know that. What it had been is it had come back, it had been 3-hole punched and stuffed into a binder. So make sure there's somebody who is qualified to look at that. The next part of this, and it's kind of the bottom part of the checklist, is that it is also a case of if there is anything that's that you have identified there, gives you an opportunity to go back to the supplier and find out what their practices are to prevent cross contact. And there's also with this, so that's where having that signature in place. Some companies I know that when they have sent this out to the companies, what they ask is that they ask that that signature be the plant manager or the operations manager who assigned it, not just the QA manager, because it really is the production manager or the plant manager who looks at the schedule and at what's going into the products. And so it's just an additional confirmation that the information isn't going to be changed unless you have been notified. And that's where it says is that for any reason there's any modifications, you must notify us immediately. And I have changed that with some of my clients to say you must notify us prior to making any changes so that we have a chance to change our packaging. And if you're interested, I've given the website for that checklist. It's at the bottom of that particular slide. So number 2 is we know what our supplier has that's coming in. Now we want to look and see, is it something that could have the potential on our own premises or as it's being transported into our premises as well. So coming in through the transport system. That looking at that potential for cross contact was at a winery, and they were using milk trucks, bulk milk trucks, to transport the juice into their winery. They had not considered the potential for any milk protein on the inside of those trucks coming into their facility. So it's looking at where that potential could. As it's going through the transport, or even before it has reached us, to look and find out what is in place. And this is an example. I was working with a company who make an entree, and they were using carrots. And when we were doing part of the risk assessment, we looked and found that they had occasions where there had been some peanuts found in the product. And so as we were doing that risk to find out where it had come from, we found, we started off looking, thinking, well, maybe it had come in on the skids that the carrots were transported on, that, had it come in through another means. And what we found out was that the carrots were also grown in an area where the crops were on a rotation basis. And so peanuts had been grown as part of the commodity crop. And so this was the situation. Carrots were being grown and harvested where peanuts were also being used. And so what is that peanuts had been grown the season previous. And so there had been some peanuts that had been left in the field. And so once the carrots were planted, the peanuts also grew. And when the harvesting equipment came through, it harvested the carrots, and as well as harvesting some of the peanuts that had grown up voluntarily. Now, when they had originally been looking at this supplier, they had thought that the scaling, the washing, the scrubbing that was done to these carrots before they were sent to my client would have taken care of that issue, the cross contact with the peanuts. But they found that they still had occasions where they would find bits of peanuts in the product that came in. So they determined that even after the processing step, the likelihood of contamination was still probable. So they had a major priority allergen that they needed to be able to avoid. And one of the things we looked at how we were going to do this, and the way, looking at different means of processing it. Was there a better way of cleaning it? Was there a better way of handling it? And what it finally came through was that the only way was to avoid it from happening in the first place. And so they changed their grower contracts. And so the grower contracts were such that anyone who wanted to grow for my client had to agree that they would not use peanuts. They would not grow any peanuts on the same land where they were growing carrots. So we didn't have to worry so much about was the processing, the washing, the scrubbing capable of removing peanuts. We just removed it from being an issue in the first place. Another part of looking at allergen risk assessment is knowing where we know what's coming into the facility, but it's also knowing where it could have cross contact within our facilities as well. And so we want to look a little bit in terms of allergen identification, where we know what we're using, and then some allergen mapping. And so allergen identification is now, this is where we have intentional. We're intentionally adding an allergen. It could be as an ingredient or raw material into the product. So we want to look at that and identify where all of those ingredients. So we have to look back at those ingredients, find out what they contain, and if any of them may contain an allergen. So we look at the labels that are coming in from the supplier, the specifications that are coming in from the supplier, and then look at and having to identify if they've said spices or colors or flavors, going back to that supplier and finding out specifically, is there anything in that grouping of materials that would have an allergen component in it. And so taking all of that information that we have collected and produce master lists of ingredients and of allergens within our facilities. And this is just some examples. This is a table that could be used as an allergen ingredient identification form. And so we'd have on the left-hand side all of the ingredients that would be coming into the facility, and then a check mark going across whether, when they contain one of the priority allergens. And this list across the top is the list of key priority allergens that we have in Canada. So you can see mustard was added a couple of years ago to that list. And so this allows us to be able to look at a graph, once this is filled in with check marks, to know all of the ingredients that would have an allergen in it. The second thing that we would do is then look at all of our finished products, our formulas that we would have, and do something similar. For all the finished products, we would look at the ingredient lists that we would have, and we'd identify whether we had one of the priority allergens in there. And so the idea is that you take the previous one that was all of the ingredients and the allergen identifications in there, and cross-reference it with this finished product to make sure that there were no ingredients that were used in a finished product that had an allergen in it that we had not identified in the finished product itself. Because remember, we're looking to make sure that every priority allergen is identified on that finished product, so somebody who has a food allergy can avoid that product that's in place. So we know what's in there. Now we want to know where it's going to move through our facility. And so this is one of the ways that we have is we do allergen mapping. And as it says, this identification, it's identifying and highlighting areas and processes itself through process flows where we have both an allergen and non-allergen product that would be handled. So an example, this is our process flow for allergen mapping. And this is one of the reasons why when we look perhaps at HACCP and we have a process flow that would be for one product, what this one is looking at is the process flow that includes all of the different products. And so here we have a line 1 that was making a cream cheese product and line 2 that was making a cottage cheese product with salmon in it. But they both use common packaging and labeling equipment. And so that by highlighting that in red, we're able to show where we have potential for cross-contact because we've used common equipment in the product itself. And so this is where it may be a bit more than what we would have just done for HACCP, which was a process flow. We compare the process flow between all of those different flows to look and see where we have something that's common. Because if we just looked at the plain cream cheese, we may not have identified that the packaging and labeling, we had a potential cross-contact with salmon in that product. We can also, another way of doing a schematic and allergen mapping is to take a plant schematic. And on that plant schematic, which would normally with HACCP, we would show the flow of people and the raw materials and the finished products. We can use that same plant schematic and show where we have the flow of allergens in the facility as well. Now, sometimes it gets a little messy if we're trying to use all of those different colors. If we've got 5 or 6 different allergens, it starts to get a little messy and hard to see where the colors are all flowing. Some of my clients, what they have used, and I think you can still get them, is acetates. Those are those clear sort of plastic sheets and what they did is they would set that over top of their plant schematic, and they would have one of those clear acetates for every allergen, and they would draw on that acetate. And if you have access to computer programs, there's computer programs today that will do this. They would draw on those acetates where they had allergens stored, where they moved through the facility. So similar to raw material and finished products that we have from a pathogenic standpoint, we were looking to see where we had cross contact from an allergen standpoint as well. Another part of allergen mapping is also looking at if you have a company that has multiple facilities. And so this is an example, as I said, when I worked in industry, the company that I worked for had 22 plants across Canada, and not all of those plants used the same ingredients or made the same products. And so this was a way of being able to know what products, which plants were using which allergens. This was useful information for our consumer contact individuals, because if consumers called in, they were able to say for the product and for the plant what the allergens were that were used in there. It was also, we used this when we were developing new products, because rather than trying to implement new procedures for preventing all allergen cross-contact, if we were introducing a potential new allergen, was we would look at which plants may already be working with that allergen. So for example, if we were introducing a new product with tree nuts, if we could, we'd try to put it into either plant B or plant D, since they already had procedures in place and were already familiar with working with the tree nuts, rather than adding it to plant A or plant C if we could possibly avoid that. Okay, so now we know where our allergens are coming in from, where our risk is, which products we've used them in. Now we need to think about how we're going to go about and manage those issues that we have. And so this allergen management program, this would really be the practices that would be going into your allergen management policy. I'm sure a number of you probably have one of the GFSI programs, BRC, FSSC 22000, SQF, and they all have a requirement for managing your allergen cross-contact program. So we're going to look and see what are some practices that we could have to avoid a potential cross-contact. So when we think in terms of allergen control, allergens coming in, they kind of have two situations. One is intentional. They are we're making a chocolate nut cookie. We're adding nuts to that cookie. So that's an intentional addition of an allergen. How we control that is we make sure that that's through the labeling and preventing that product from a chocolate nut cookie going into a bag that wasn't properly labeled. So we handle it through labeling and watching our formulations to make sure that we've got the right ingredients going into the right product. And then if we do any rework, we're making sure that we have traceability so that we're putting identical products into identical products. And we're going to put that into our allergen management program. Our second part of our allergen control is where we would have inadvertent, and this is through cross-contact. And so this is really where we're looking to make sure that we have, through our best practices, that we have programs in place that are going to prevent that potential for cross-contact. So when we look at it, we're bringing it down into our integrated allergen management program or our policy. So our first one, we hopefully know from the checklist that we've sent out, our purchasing information that we have, we know what raw materials are coming into our facility, what raw materials have potential allergens in them, or that we also know that suppliers, if they do perhaps run an allergen in their facility that's not in our product, that we know that they have good practices in place to prevent any cross-contamination. So for example, when I was in industry, I was approving a new supplier. When they had sent the checklist back, I found we were looking at them for soybean oil. When they sent the checklist back, we found out that they also ran peanut oil in their facility. And so what I did was I went out, I was able to go to do an on-site audit of their procedures. And what I found is that the peanut oil was processed in a separate part of the building that was, access was limited to that area, that all of the piping and coupling, etc., they were a different size, that somebody physically could not cross-connect the pipes and any of the delivery parts from the peanut oil to soybean oil. And as well, that I also had a chance to interview a number of their employees, and I found out that they understood why they were, it was important that they not cross-connect or cross-contaminate any of the peanut products with the soybean products. And so I ended up approving that supplier, even though they ran peanut oil in the same facility that we were getting our product back. So it really is, in terms of as it says, with the ingredient purchasing policy, is that we have that checklist, and that when it says special reference to that allergy status, is that back to that one, is that they cannot make any changes to their product or to other products within their facility that would change that checklist unless they have given us prior written notification, so that it gives us a chance to make corrections or make changes into our facility so that we can change labeling or whatever needs to be there. Change in supplier, again, must be accompanied by the appropriate checks. We would never, should never just accept a supplier based on that they said, that they are not running with an allergen in their products, that they don't have it in there. If you are making a claim, it's important that you have confirmed that a claim of being allergen free. It's important that you have confirmed that you verify that allergen free status, and it may be going back through the supply chain because your supplier may not have that particular allergen, but have they done as thorough a search on their suppliers? And this, I was doing some on-site audits for a client who was making an allergen free claim, and I was auditing their suppliers who had sent into them that they had none of the designated allergens. In this case, it was peanuts, so that they had none of the designated allergens in their facility. I was going out to do a confirming audit, and after about 5 or 6 and people going, I don't know why you're here because we already told them we didn't have any. When I got to the 7th one, they had sent in the same information saying that they had no peanuts on site. But during the audit, I found that they had some peanut products that were still in their warehouse. They had been brought in for a product development trial, and they were still there. And it was obvious from what we saw that the employees were using this peanut meal as their for their lunches, probably making some peanut products for their lunches. And so my client had to drop that person had to drop that company as a supplier because they were concerned that they had been told that this company had no peanut products on site, that they didn't use peanut products, and yet during the audit, this was found that that was not the case. To go through. So once we have that, so now we have our receiving and storage, and so even if you have that agreement with the supplier, it is still important that when incoming materials are coming in, that you're reviewing the labels of that incoming product just to see if they have made a change and perhaps haven't notified you. And one company I've worked with, they had a sort of an interesting way because the employees, to review labels of ingredients when they were coming in, employees didn't always know what it should have been. And so what they had done was they prepared, again, an acetate, that clear kind of plastic form. And so they had printed the ingredient declarations for all of the incoming materials, and then they'd made one up. And so what the employees did was they were able to take that acetate, just overlay it on the packaging itself, and look and see that everything matched up. If everything matched up, then they didn't have to do a thorough line by line ingredient by ingredient check. They were able to look and say, yes, it matches up with what we've had previously. So that was one of the easy ways of looking at that for receiving. Another thing is that when receiving allergen material, is that it's useful to have a color coding or a tagging system, something that's going to make it very apparent to the folks within your operations that there's an allergen in that product that when it's coming in, because then it's something that's going to be carried through, through storage practices, through use in formulas, through use in the mixing area, the processing area itself. And so I like the idea of a color coding. Now, part of it is that, or numbering system that's there. And I've started to see more numbering systems so that each allergen is given a specific number. And the reason I like this particular way of designating it is we don't we don't have to be quite as concerned about potential color blindness, where somebody may not recognize the colors that are in there, or a tagging system, and if it's tagged, we have to be concerned if it's fallen off, and even just identifying the allergen by word. Because if you happen to have a number of different languages within your facility, if they may not recognize, again, the allergen by, by its English or its whatever language that's there with a number. We don't have to have people know that, again, casein is a milk protein. We don't have to think of what color it is. If we've given it number 3 as it's going through, and we carry that number 3 all the way through from where it's being stored, where it's going into processing and formulas and recipes, we know that that is the allergen that's in there. And we can look at those numbers and be able to know that all of the number 3s are stored together in place. And as it says, it's really making sure that through the handling of that material, it's not causing contamination with other ingredients. So it's really as materials are being moved, if something's if a package has been opened or ripped, that it's not being carried through a warehouse and potentially contaminating other areas. Okay. And that really brings us into some of the storage, the segregation practices that are here. And when I've been into facilities, we often hear, you need to have separate allergen storage. With this one, I've had some people who've misunderstood. They think that if they have a separate allergen storage, it doesn't really matter how they've stored all of the allergens within that area. Really what the key is that we do not have, we've stored products so that it's either individual storage or storage of like above like. So for example, and again, I'll use the example of sesame seeds that we have as an allergen here in Canada. If I had a 12-grain mix that contains sesame seeds and sesame seeds, just dedicated packaging of sesame seeds, I could store the sesame seed product over the 12-grain mix, because if there was any potential spillage from the sesame seeds, it would spill into the 12-grain mix, which already had sesame seeds in it. To go through. This would be another place where you could use your designated the numbers to identify the different allergens as well. So it's looking at the number. So the number 3, it's always over top of the number 3 product. And then if you are opening up, let's say, a bagged product and putting it out into a container, it's a good idea to have dedicated storage containers for this, because then that way, once they're labeled and once people get used to using that, and especially if they're color coded, there is not the potential for someone to put the wrong allergen in that product and having cross contact. A key problem that is sort of in storage areas is spillage. Something gets ripped, bag gets torn open, that as part of the procedures is to have a spillage procedure. And so some of the clients that I've worked with, what we've developed is an allergen cleanup kit. And so this is the broom that's used to clean up that allergen, so that it's dedicated to that allergen. We're not using one of the expensive brooms that have been purchased. It is some plastic boot coverings, so that somebody's not picking it up on the bottom of their shoes and perhaps tracking it through the rest of the facility. And then it all goes back into a plastic bag that then is taken and thrown out, so that we're not, as we're cleaning up that spillage, we're not putting it into a garbage container that potentially may move into a different area, and that we have potential for cross contamination. And then the final part of that is that on that kit that they have developed, that they've put together, is they have the written procedures, written cleanup procedures for allergens, and the documentation that needs to go along with that, so that's all kept together. Once we have allergens, and if we're working, and this is really where our intentional allergens come in, is that we can use production scheduling. And we often hear this, is that we want to run our allergen-free products, or our mostly allergen-free products, at the beginning, and then we run our allergen products at the end of shift. And then we would then go into our normal cleanup procedures. What we want to have in our policy is that if for any reason we have to change that schedule, that we have to run an allergen-containing product in the midst of our allergen-free products, is that there must be a complete allergen clean that is done at the end of that allergen production run. And so that's put into our policies. I have a company that what they have done, because part of the reason that they were having to make a change to their production scheduling is that their sales people weren't very good at placing their orders. And so what they had done as part of their policy is that they had written in that if the cleanup had to be done as a result of normal cleaning practice, normal production practices, that was a production cost. However, if they had to do an extra allergen clean because the salespeople had had tried to break into the production schedule, is that in that case, if they had to run the allergen-containing product in the midst of normal production, that all of the costs that were associated with having to run that allergen clean program became a sales cost. And that was written into their policies. So that may be something that if you happen to have people who move around your production scheduling, you may make the cost of that extra allergen cleaning their responsibility. What it does help as well is it helps to make sure that the production people aren't trying to skimp on that cleanup, because they're trying to get back into production. Okay. Another place where we have potential for cross contact or putting product into the wrong package is during our rework or our reuse. And so here I have companies that what they do, worked with companies that what we've done is that any product that has to be reworked has to be tagged. There has to be documentation with it. What we've done is for any rework that contains an allergen or allergens, we've used different colors of rework tags for that, just to really visually designate the difference between normal rework and rework containing an allergen. So what the other part of that is, and really what we're trying to do is make it difficult for somebody to put allergen containing rework into a non-allergen product, is we had a requirement for a double sign-off. And so when rework was being used, there were 2 people that had to sign off when we would use any of the allergen containing product, really to confirm that it had gone, that what product it had gone back into, and to confirm that it had not gone into any product that was not identical. And today, we used to say like into like. Today, best practices, we've now said identical into identical. That even though we know that most programs, most regulations are looking at 8 or 10 or 12 key allergens, as we said before, really any food protein has the potential to cause an allergic reaction. And so it's important that even if something may not be one of the key allergens, is that we're only putting it back into a product where it would be on the label and properly declared. The last good practice that I saw from one company that I was doing some work with is that, and this is sort of a cross between Rework and storage, their allergen containing rework was stored in a different area. It was stored at a distant area from the normal processing area. And when I had asked them why they had stored it so far away from the normal rework and processing area, they said they were making it difficult for their employees to fail. And I thought that was a great way of looking at this. They said for somebody to go and get that allergen rework product and bring it here, they've had to have gone out of their way to do that. And so it was really everything that they were putting in place. That's something to think of. What are the things that we can do to make it difficult to fail and ensure that we're not going to have an allergen reworked into a product where it shouldn't be there in the first place. We're working with human beings, so we also have to make sure that our personnel practices, that really they understand what the practices are and why they're necessary. So in terms of separate personnel working on, if you've got an allergen and a non-allergen line, having color coding for their uniforms or perhaps their hairnets, so that it's key if somebody who's working with an allergen has gone and perhaps going to talk to a friend on another line, we can see they're showing up because they've got a different color of lab coat or collar or hairnets. And that really says that we want to restrict those employees where they have movement through, although there's some employees such as maintenance people that they are in different areas. And so they have to know, what are their changes similar to pathogens? What are the changes that they have to make in terms of uniforms? And really with maintenance, it's the tools. Yes, if they've been working with tools with that, ideally is that we would have tools that would be dedicated to the allergen area. And it's not such a problem if we took them from a non-allergen area to our allergen area, but the problem is if we move them back. And so it's having that dedicated tools, or having a way of cleaning them to be able to make sure that we've removed all of the allergen, that protein residue that would be on the tools themselves. And then following hand washing, eating areas, personal hygiene, and that's really going through in terms of the training. And so it's important, as it says, that all employees have been trained, and usually this is pretty good. The one problem that we sometimes run into is where we have temporary agency staff. And so, we've trained our full-time employees. They know, they understand what's there, but we must make sure that anyone who is working in the facility, and that's the temporary agency staff, that they have training as well. Sometimes we may try and skip that, saying, oh, they're only just going to be in the, they're not going to be touching the product. They're just going to be in, a non-product contact zone area. And so we try and save a little bit of money and not train that agency staff. And I know of at least 2 companies who have had to destroy product. They identified it while it was still at their facility, so it wasn't a recall. It didn't get out to market. But in the one instance, temporary agency employee had a handful of peanuts in his jacket pocket, and he was how it was seen was, as the supervisor came around, he saw the little pile of peanut shells on the floor underneath the conveyor. But just because it was peanuts, and with this facility with claims, that product had to be, they couldn't take a chance of sending that product out, so they had to destroy that product. So looking in terms of changes, just going to design of the premises and facility here is really part of it. Is that design is making sure the equipment, it's accessible, that we can get into it, we can clean it, we can visually check and make sure that that we don't have any cross, that we've been able to remove the material. And so it's really important that our maintenance and our engineering staff are involved in our allergen program. And then at the beginning is that product development and brand extensions. If possible, with new products, don't even add that one of those priority allergens to it. That's possible if it's there. However, if you're getting that customer who really wants it, they're really demanding it, and you have to add an allergen to a formula, make it really obvious. Maybe it's a bright flash on the front of the package that says, that this cake mix is now made with the goodness of real butter, so that it's really brings it to the attention of that allergic individual, because they may have been buying that product previously. Now it's giving them that information that, okay, I've got a dairy allergy, I can't use this product anymore. And making sure that you've communicated that to all of the people who need to know it. And we know that from an allergen standpoint, and recalls, that packaging and labeling and errors with packaging and labeling have been when they've done the root cause analysis, have been one of the key areas where we saw problems. And so there has to be a label approval process. And so especially with allergens, so maybe there's, again, a double sign off for people to look at the formula and to make sure that the label is correct, that we've identified that's on there. If we have to, maybe we're changing the formula, and we have to make new packaging for that formula, that recipe that's there. We can't introduce that recipe until we have the new packaging in place. And so then it's key that we've destroyed the old packaging, so somebody, again, can't use it in error. In addition to this packaging, the other place where I've seen the problem is that sometimes our packaging supplier may have had some existing packaging. So it's important that they have that you've communicated with them and how much packaging they have left. And then the last thing, sort of in terms of labeling, is precautionary labeling that cannot be used just to get over not having to use good GMPs. And I see my time. I'm going to move through these last ones, because I think the allergen cleaning.
It's okay, Margaret. It's fine. You just
okay.
Take your time. Take your time.
Okay. That's fine. So the last, as I said, one of the things was allergen labeling is key to be able to show that from the label indicating for the person that allergen is in there. The other part that is really key from our allergen control is cleaning and validation. And so unlike pathogens, where we really have to look into, we're really concerned about the food contact surfaces, with allergen clean, it's really what's not only that food contact surface, but what's around. Do we have pipes, overhead pipes? Do we have ledges where we may have allergen dust collecting on there? We need to make sure that those areas are clean as well. And so part of it is that as said, with having that dedicated cleaning equipment, so that we're not potentially moving allergens, cleaning and moving allergens between products. Effective cleaning equipment and supplies. One of the key things to remember with allergens is, remember, it's the protein. We're having to remove that protein. So it's the detergent or the soap that's going to remove that. I've had people who've contacted me saying, you know, we've changed sanitizers a number of times and we still have allergens. Sanitizers are for control of pathogens. When we're looking at control of allergens, we need to remove the protein that's there. And then with allergen cleaning, with dry products inside of pipes, we often will see them perhaps flushing or a product purge. They will run another product. I've seen rice, although you have to be careful because in some countries, rice is a priority allergen. They'll run rice or salt or sugar through a line just to push all of that product that would be remaining in behind has been moved out. So that people know, and this is some what allergen cleaning needs to be done, because you may not need to do allergen cleaning with everyone. We could have an allergen matrix, and so this matrix is just showing what products have what allergens, and then this is the allergen cleaning matrix. So this would show, as we changed over, that when we changed over from product D to E, because we've now had, we've changing from a product that had tree nuts to a product that doesn't, we need to do an allergen clean. Another way of showing that matrix or changeover grid is something like this. And some of you may say, well, if you're moving from chocolate to white milk, you'd want to do an allergen wash, but I've just done, for the purpose of this one, a color wash. And so it helps because this tells the person as they're making a change what they need to do. You know, is it a color wash, a flavor wash, what they need to, what type of changeover they have. It's also important, this is one of the key things, is not only just having a cleaning program, but we have to validate that cleaning program. Is it effective? Is it going to remove that allergen that's there? And there's two parts to it. One is that physical and that visual validation of the allergen changeover. And that's really showing that as part of that validation is that people are using our written sanitation program. You wanted to make sure you're not validating a program where somebody may have used more detergent just because they know you're going to be doing the validation. So you want to make sure that they've followed your cleaning practices. And then the second part of the validation is using, and there's a number of different allergen test kits out there. One of the things is that, especially when you're doing allergen validation, you want to use, if possible, a specific protein allergen test kit. So if you were trying to look and see if you'd removed milk protein, you want to use a milk protein, not just a general protein product. And so part of it is that you, through the testing protocol, is that you'd run the product with the allergen as you normally do. And then the second step is one that people often don't think of. You would swab some of the surfaces before you clean it. You would test it with those allergen swabs. And people often look at me and say, well, why? You know, we haven't cleaned it yet. Well, the thing is that you want to ensure that you're able to find the allergen there, because sometimes what's happened is people do the clean, run the product, then they clean it, and then they test it with the allergen swab afterwards, and they find that there's nothing that they found, and they say, well, our cleaning program is effective. Problem is that there was no allergen to be detected there in the first place. As you're validating your program, you want to make sure that you can show that there was allergen there, then follow your program through as it was written, and then have the validation. And so if you can show that after that you've removed it, then you can say that your training program is effective. And finally, it really is that as part of an allergen management program review, as with everything, it needs to stay current. So this is kind of a health check, is that you'd want to, on a regular basis, at least a year, look and review your allergen hazard analysis. Have there been allergens that have been added that perhaps you hadn't noticed? Is the management of those programs, or perhaps it's a case of maybe you've been able to remove some allergens from your facility. So perhaps the management of it, you don't need to do an allergen wash any longer because you don't use any tree nuts. You eliminated all of those products. Looking at your cleaning procedures, are they still current? Perhaps revalidating those procedures to see that it's in place, especially because as more and more allergen-specific swabs are coming around, you may now be able to validate the process with a specific allergen test kit. Training records, as I said, making sure that everybody knows what the issues are, what our control programs are with allergen management, and especially with our temporary staff. And then finally, to look at your consumer complaints. Are the complaints actually not even customer complaints, but maybe customer contact? Are there new concerns that customers are bringing to your attention, or consumers are bringing to your attention, that you may need to go back and to bring it in and make it as an additional part of your allergen management program from that? So that brings me to the end, and as Simon had said, we have some time. If you still have time, we have some time for questions to go through. So I will stop sharing.
That was brilliant, Jennifer. I mean, I think due to time, I think you skipped through the slides towards the end there, but which is a bit of a shame, because the detail in that, the way it laid out what you need in an allergen management program was brilliant, and the comments in the sidebar have been fantastic. I mean, one of the main things that I've taken out of it is, if you've got a lot of allergens in your business, it's a tremendous job. It's a huge undertaking.
It is, and that's where you hear people say, well, you run the allergen products at the end. Well, okay, fine. I have 8 allergens in my facility. Which ones do I run at the end?
I mean, the key word is prevention. Like when you talked about, when you're formulating your products, think about reducing potential allergens. When you're designing your equipment, your flow, your machinery, when you're getting your packaging, your ingredients, the employees, all of those inputs into your process, you've got to be thinking about minimizing the risk of allergens.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then you're planning of your work, and in a lot of businesses where you've got quick turnover, small order sizes, it's absolute, but it has to be done. Yeah.
It does. Otherwise, you're putting your consumer at risk.
Exactly. Well, we will take questions just for. I mean, it's almost 10 past the hour, so we'll pick up some questions. The thing is, there's been that many questions. I can't scroll down any further. So if anybody does have a question, please ask now in the sidebar, and we'll pick up. I know there was one there from Lawanda. What is best practice when there are no allergen kit for the ingredient? So if there's no allergen kit, what do you do?
If there's no allergen kit, your best practice is there are some general allergen kits. So at least you've been able to test with an allergen. I've seen companies who've used ATP. ATP is not specific to allergens, at least with an allergen. And then testing with a general allergen kit or a general protein kit, and then, as I said, watch that as they are introduced. The other thing is, and I have to watch how I say this, because I'll spell it out. There is, especially for folks who are in North America, there's at the University of Nebraska, there's the Food Allergy Research and Resource Program, FARRP, University of Nebraska. They and there are some other labs that will as well, but University of Nebraska have some testing that they can do for proteins that would not be generally, kits would not be generally available. So you may look at something like that, having it tested someplace like the University of Nebraska Food Allergy Research and Resource Program.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Okay. Simon, I want to just ask you quickly, do you have, just because there are so many questions, after the webinar, are they still available to you?
Yes, what I was going to mention actually, what we do is we download all of the chat and comments and questions from there. So what we can do is we can post them on the IFSQM forum, and perhaps you could follow up by
I will.
Typing answers if we make, because there were so many. Okay, let me just see if there's any. Should the risk assessment be done for primary packaging and secondary packaging?
Are you looking like for I'm not quite sure, Annika. Are you thinking that the packaging would be introducing
I think so. I think
the allergen? Actually, or I may think that with this one, I'm going to turn it around a little bit different way, is that you may have primary packaging, the packaging that would go on to, let's say, the store shelf, and then you would have a case that would go around it. If you have an ingredient declaration on both of those, the primary packaging that's on the product itself and the case itself, and then the larger case, you would want to make sure that as part of your verification, that both of those ingredient lists, those ingredient declarations are in agreement. It's why today, especially, I'm thinking in terms of perhaps something like yogurt. There's 8 small individual yogurts inside of an overwrap, that only the overwrap may have the ingredient declaration, and then on the individual, it would say that they were not for sale individually. And so now we only have to look at the one ingredient declaration. But if we had an ingredient declaration on both the outside, the cardboard overwrap, and on the individual cartons, you'd have to make sure that you had a procedure in place in terms of labeling, that both of those were checked to be accurate.
Okay, fantastic. Let's see. Top one, as a distribution company, we deal in case outs. Supplier does not disclose the ingredients or allergen on secondary packaging. How shall I, in that case, should I make an allergen control program?
In that case, I'm taking post. And so it would be something similar to companies that say, well, we don't deal with any allergens, any of the key allergens. You would want to look again at your employee practices. So it may not be that you don't not allow peanut products, but that only good manufacturing, good distribution practices. So you have a lunchroom. The employees aren't allowed to eat out on the product, out on the distribution floor. In this case, even though they haven't told you what they are, you may want to ask them, or I'm sure that probably your customers, or not your customers, and some of your people who are sending products into you would tell you what they needed to be, that they would want to avoid them. I know that the company that I looked at that had peanut-free claim wanted to make sure that any distribution centers that their product was going through, that they had agreements with those distribution centers that they weren't being stored next to skids of peanuts.
Okay, brilliant. Agnes, does uniform used by personnel, well, could it be a cross-contamination through mixed clothing laundering?
It's something, with the protein, and I'm going to go back and use sort of my examples from more experience with pathogens. It would be one of the things that if that was a concern that you had, you would want to be discussing that with your uniform cleaning company, and looking and finding out what are the procedures and what are the detergents, the soaps that they're using, and are they effective at removing that allergen from that uniform?
Yeah, I mean, uniform, they've got to be fit for purpose.
Yes.
As well. I mean, you don't want them washing mechanics, dirty, oily uniforms and all sorts with your hygienic wear.
Exactly. We have a lot more things other than just allergens. It's the pathogens and just all of the other chemical hazards that would be there as well.
Okay. I mean, literally, we could go on all day with this, Jennifer, but I think it's 15:15 now. It's been fantastic. You can see the amount of discussion in the sidebar. It goes on for quite a few meters, actually. So what we'll do is we'll leave it there. I'll just say thanks for the presentation. It was great. Thanks for you being here today from the IFSQN and from myself and from all the attendees. So thanks very much, Jennifer, and we will pick up on all the comments and questions later.
I commit to getting answers as best I can.
All right, brilliant.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for your input today. It's been a really great webinar. I've issued the certificate in the sidebar. You can grab that now. If you don't get that now, we will follow up with an email within 24 hours with the slides, the video, the certificate. We'll link to Ruth Bell's webinar that gave a primer on allergens. And also we'll link to the forum discussion topic where we'll add some of these questions that we'll pick up from here. Apart from that, wishing you all a great rest of the week. Well, not weekend, it's not weekend yet, but actually a lot of the US folks will be finishing for Thanksgiving, having a long weekend. So happy Thanksgiving, enjoy your time off with your friends and family. Have a great weekend. And we'll see you back next Friday for Ruth's presentation on validation of control measures. So thanks for taking part today, and we'll see you again next week. Take care. Bye.